Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new edition of the Jazz Flashes podcast. My name is Anton Garcia Fernandez, and I write the Jazz Flashes blog at jazzflashes.blogspot.com. And today, for this edition of the show, we have a very special guest who is joining us from a small French restaurant in New York City. I'm coming to you from Northwest Tennessee, and on the other side of the line, I can see him right here on the screen. I have Mr. Roger Davidson. Hello, Roger. How are you doing this afternoon?
Very well, Anton. It's nice to be on your show, and nice to talk to you. I'm very glad to have this opportunity to talk about my passion for this album and for music, and Brazilian music in particular.
That album that Roger is talking about is one that I have in my hand that has just been released, well, not too long ago, and it has a title both in Portuguese and in English. I happen to speak some Portuguese, so, you know, it's an album that was...
Podemos falar somente português agora.
Se você quiser, podemos falar. Tudo bom, tudo bom. The album is called Oração para Amanhã, in English, Prayer for Tomorrow, and it comes. It's one of several albums that Roger Davidson has devoted to the crossing between jazz and Brazilian music. And the first thing that I would like to ask you has to do a little bit with your own life and your own career before you made this album. You were originally born in Paris, France, but you moved to the United States fairly early on. How did all of that happen?
Well, I didn't have a lot of choice in the matter in the early days. But having said that, of course, I'm very glad I'm born in France, and I love my parents, and they were very good to me throughout my life. And the upshot of having been growing up as a dual national has enriched my career, has enriched because I grew up with two languages. I grew up with actually three languages. I grew up with German as well, because my mother and my father both spoke German, and my mother in particular, she used to sing German lullabies to me as a kid. So later, I majored in the German language in college because I knew it was part of my heritage, and also because it was useful for me in my musical career. But beyond that, I was always fascinated by any language, no matter whether it had European roots or Asian roots or any language around the world.
And you were also fascinated by music, I assume. What are your first memories of listening to music?
From the very beginning, my parents tell me that when I was a baby, I had very clear reactions to the music I liked and didn't like. And my father used to tell me stories that when he was holding me in his arms and introducing me to recordings, that I made it very clear what I thought was good and what I thought was bad. But anyway, besides that, I started playing the piano when I was about 4 and taught myself essentially, and then listened to thousands of recordings and concerts. My parents took me to concerts from an early age, and my parents were not musicians, but they were very appreciative of music, and they were basically musical by nature themselves. I'm the first professional musician in my entire ancestry. Although my great-grandfather was a very strong amateur musician, he did not make that a career. And so Brazilian music in particular came up when I was about 9 or 10 years old, when I accidentally heard I was hearing other people playing Stan Getz and Charlie Bird, João Gilberto, and other recordings of early bossa nova, and it fascinated me. So I wanted to know, where the musicians were, where they came from, and what was that all about. So I started listening avidly to Brazilian music from an early age.
That was around the time in the history of jazz in the early 1960s, late 1950s that Brazilian music really appeared with a vengeance and took the jazz scene by storm. A lot of great records were made at that time.
Exactly. 1962 was the first time I remember hearing a Brazilian jazz recording, and that was the 1962 recording called Big Band Bossa Nova, arranged by Gary McFarland, with Stan Getz and other great musicians, and that really fired me up. And then I heard Charlie Bird and Jean Gilberto and later recordings, 1963, 64. Of course, 63 was the great The Girl from Ipanema came out, and in that famous recording, I think you remember that Olga Albizu, I believe she was the Brazilian painter that was on the cover of several of those early albums. And then I realized someday I want to go to Rio de Janeiro and the rest of Brazil too. And eventually I did, but it was a long time after that.
Now we could really describe your musical taste as very eclectic. It's not just jazz, Brazilian music, tango, Caribbean music, even classical music. You're classically trained, I believe.
Yes.
But when did you what was it that attracted you about this Brazilian music?
It was the spirit, the energy, the passion for life, the aspect of relaxed celebration, the beautiful melodies, the incredible rhythms. And actually, I didn't know any Brazilians personally until much later. And then one day, several years after I'd started a recording company called Soundbrush Records, which my recordings are on, I expressed a desire to go to Brazil and make a recording there and do performances there. So it was only in 2011 that I finally went to Brazil.
So it took you a while to get to Brazil from those early years when you were interested in the music to your final visit to the country. What was it like to visit Brazil in person?
I remember the first time I landed at Antonio Carlos Jobim Airport in Rio de Janeiro. I felt like I was coming home. And so I knew that Brazil had always been another native country to me because I wasn't born there, but I felt like I belonged. My heart belonged there, for many reasons, because of the music, because of the culture, and because of the spirit of Brazilian life.
Now, you mentioned that this new album, Prayer for Tomorrow, was released on Soundbrush Records. You actually started that record label in 1998. What were your intentions behind starting that label?
Well, the reason it got started and it was called Soundbrush is because I wanted to meld visual and art and musical art into one company, and the recordings I was intending to produce would be inspired by painting and sculpture and architecture, and that there would be, in my vision, there would be paintings and other forms of art that would be inspired by music. That didn't quite work out that way in the end, but in one sense it did, because once Soundbrush really got off the ground, which was in 2003, we paid a lot of attention to the quality of the covers. So we have been praised for our covers to the point where an outfit called Museum Music, which distributes in museums, took us on and wanted to distribute our recordings, perhaps for the quality of the music, but certainly for the quality of the covers, because they liked the way they looked. So we've always made a high premium on our covers. We paid a lot of attention to those.
And this is the case also with the album that we're going to be talking about right now, Prayer for Tomorrow, or Oração para Amanhã. You're listening to a new edition of the Jazz Flashes podcast with Anton Garcia Fernandez, talking to you from Northwest Tennessee, and joining us from New York is Roger Davidson, who leads the trio on these great recordings that were made just a few months ago and released also just a few months ago. The album is called Prayer for Tomorrow, in Portuguese Oração para Amanhã. Could you tell us a little bit about what that title means?
Yes. The title of this tune, Oração para Amanhã, was the tune that I actually wrote specifically to it was inspired by a wish to play with my trio and Hendrik Berkens, who plays the vibraphone in this. And I knew he was a very fine musician, and I knew from previous experience of playing with him that he would pick up on the spirit of it very well. And also new, that was one aspect, but perhaps even more, it was written because the world desperately needs as many prayers for tomorrow as possible. We're in a very serious state right now with a lot of corruption and a lot of human rights abuses and a lot of environmental abuses. And there are many doubts that people rightfully have about the future, but if we do the right thing and pray for the right thing and pray for our ability to strengthen our resolve to take care of our beautiful planet and take care of ourselves and take care of each other as one spiritual family, we can have a much better future. That is why I wrote Oração para Amanhã. And so ultimately, I always have a spiritual intention with tunes that are called something like that because they mean something more than just entertainment.
So, even though, of course, there are no lyrics to this prayer or any text to it, there is certainly a spiritual / maybe political message behind what you were trying to do here.
I wouldn't say political, but spiritual, yes.
Okay.
Because what does politics mean? It's a reflection of the ability of nations to get along within each other. And the most important thing is for us to see a future in which we're helping each other. It's important for human beings to help each other. And my prayer for the world is that we have a world in which we are helping each other and not fighting each other.
And that's the kind of message that needs to be heard, and it's also a kind of message that could be conveyed through music.
Exactly.
Definitely.
Exactly.
Now, this album was recorded live at the Zinc Bar in New York City back in May and October of 2016. How did the project of Oração para Amanhã come about?
Well, it didn't start with a project. It started with a series. It started those two very good performances that I thought we should capture on a CD. Once we had played 2 gigs there, and then I turned to my wife and discussed it with her and discussed it with my manager subsequently and said, I think we have to have an album based on the best of our performances in those 2 gigs. And that's where the project started. But it didn't start out by being a project before the gigs happened. It happened afterwards.
So, besides yourself on this record, we have your new trio, Eduardo Bello on bass,
Yes.
and Adriano Santos on drums. Could you tell us a little bit about the musicians that appear on this album, and maybe later we could talk a little bit about Hendrik Merkens, who plays the vibraphone and the harmonica on this record?
Well, let me start with him instead of the other way around.
Okay.
Because although it's called the Roger Davidson Trio with Hendrik Merkens as a guest, it's really a quartet because we invited him to join us as a guest. But what it actually turned into was a quartet, and that's what it really is, because he's playing in almost every tune. He's not playing just, in a spot here, in a spot there. And the reason for that is because I realized he tunes into Brazilian music in much the same way that I do. He also has a similar background. He happens to be German, but I'm also, by ethnic background, also German, mostly. German and French, but German from my father's side, at least, and to some extent from my mother's side. And also, my wife is from Brazil, and Hendrik's wife is also from Brazil, by coincidence. And when I got to know Hendrik, it turned out that he had an equal passion for Brazilian music as I do. He's also a very good composer. Someday I hope to record his tunes as well. But he's also a very good composer of Brazilian-influenced music. So we have a similar background, and we hit it off right away. Going on to the other musicians, Eduardo Bello is a young Brazilian bass player from Brasilia, Brazil, the capital of Brazil. Happens to be the same town that my wife is. And he's a to play with. He's very musically, very solid. He's got a great bass sound. He likes to be a bass player, like all the other bass players I've played with, but he really is in tune with being a bass player for Brazilian music, and he's very alert, very sharp. Adriano Santos, I have played with him before in other venues. It's not a new musical relationship, but he's always, he has great spirit, lively, very precise. So it's a joy. So all of us together, we realized, make a great combo, and that's how it started.
Now, the harmonica in particular is a kind of instrument that one doesn't get to hear very often in jazz. Of course, there are some great musicians in the history of jazz that play the harmonica, but it's not an instrument that one gets to hear very often in records, jazz records these days. In the case of Oração para Amanhã, I would say that the harmonica definitely adds richness to the sound, and also enriches the overall sound of the quartet.
Okay, the harmonica is always a soulful instrument, and it really sings. And as a matter of fact, you may not know this, but we just did a studio recording with the same group, and and deepened our involvement with many of the same tunes and some new ones as well. And so there will be another recording coming up within the next year with harmonica and vibraphone by Hendrik, same group. But the harmonica is always a soulful, singing instrument that really cries from the heart, and Hendrik certainly plays it that way.
You have written all the songs, all the tunes for this album, and you've already mentioned a little bit about how or why you wrote Prayer for Tomorrow. Were you trying to capture sort of the same mood with the rest of the songs, or how did the other songs begin to evolve?
Well, let me deepen the conversation a little bit, because what I was going to get into is that although I've written Brazilian music for a long time, the intensity and the joy kicked up considerably some years ago when I met my wife, Niceia, because she's the passion of my life, and no, not just because she's from Brazil, but it happened that she increased my sense of joy and confidence and well-being so much that the energy of my music kicked up several notches. So I ended up writing more tunes with even more enthusiasm, more depth, more joy than I had before. And therefore, my repertoire is increased exponentially since 2013. And this is also why we just recorded a new album with great enthusiasm, because they're all new tunes. And some of them are on this recording, but most of them are not. And so I'm constantly creating something new, but my passion for Brazilian music is deepened and intensified because of my happy marriage, and you should know that too, because it's a major factor.
Is that album coming out this year, or maybe slated for next year?
We don't know yet, but it's in the process of being mixed, and I think it will come out toward the end of this year. And I have to check with my production team and find out. But we will let you know, for sure. I'm very proud of that album, as I am of this.
Well, if it's as good as the one I have in my hands, Oração para Amanhã, I definitely would like to hear about it. This one was an album that I received, a few weeks ago, and I kept playing it over and over again, and that's when I decided that you should be guesting on the podcast, and I wanted to write a little article about the album, because both my wife and myself really enjoy listening to it. Now, Roger, I mentioned before that you are classically trained, and you also have love for classical music, and you have played and play classical music as well. Being classically trained for a jazz pianist, is that some kind of a hindrance when playing jazz, or is it helpful?
No. By no means. It actually has deepened and enriched my ability to discover the musical roots with which I play anything. It doesn't matter whether it's jazz or folk music. I play a great deal of other things. I also play klezmer music in the Jewish tradition with great enthusiasm, and I've written a number of klezmer tunes. This is part of my heritage. I'm a mixture of mixed religions, but I just consider myself universal, but part of my family is Jewish, so it's in my blood, and I happen to love the klezmer tradition from Central Europe. But whenever I'm playing, it's informed by my classical background as much as it is by gospel music, by blues, by jazz, by funk, and any music from South America that I've ever been able to get my hands on. Mostly Brazilian, but also Cuban, Argentine tango I played a lot of. And it's all part of the same tree. They're just different branches.
And you have recorded at least a whole album of tango music.
I've recorded about 3 of them.
3 of them.
Maybe 4. Yeah. And I will continue to do that because it's a great dance and it's a great vibe, you know, and it's a wonderful thing. But before I forget, I don't want to forget to mention our recording engineer of this album, Oração, Amanhã, who did such a brilliant job of capturing the live recording in such a fashion that it almost sounds like it was recorded in a studio. And that's Luis Baquet. He runs Luis Baquet Recordings, B-A-C-Q-U-E. You look him up. He's a great engineer. He's done many albums with me and many live performances with me. And I can't speak more highly of him. It's been a joy to work with.
And you're absolutely right. When you listen to the album, you don't always realize that it's actually a live recording because it sounds so crisp and so clean and so clear. And really, you realize at the end of the tune, maybe when you hear some applause here or there. But the truth is that the album has perfect sound, and really, it's a fantastic release that I truly enjoy listening to. And you know, I wouldn't really say that if I didn't believe it. Now, going back to your influences in jazz, when it comes to playing jazz piano, who would you say you learned the most from? Who are those musicians in the history of jazz, or maybe people that you've known or people that you've admired that you feel have influenced you the most as far as playing jazz piano?
That's a good question. Bill Evans is probably at the top of the list. Oscar Peterson, Errol Garner, and let me think now, and a whole host of classical pianists, including Walter Gieseking, all the way through Murray Pariah and Emmanuel Ax, and I could go on and on. Maurizio Pollini. I've learned a lot from the way that different pianists approach the piano. One thing that I've learned, the most important thing, is that playing the piano is not up and down all the time. A lot of pianists are very brutal because all they know is up and down. You know, you hit the piano keys and it's like a hammer, but that doesn't make graceful music. You have to realize there's an upstroke as well. There's a graceful flow to how you approach the keys of the piano with your fingers. And that creates the phrasing, that creates the kind of pulse that you hear in the music. And actually, two people playing the same piano will make it sound like different pianos. And I've always tried to surrender to the music rather than to thinking that all I had to do was hit the key.
Now, you've been playing in the United States and outside of the United States as well.
Yes.
For
That's right.
for a long time. Have you noticed any changes in all your years of playing jazz as far as the interest in jazz in this country?
No change at all. It's always been intense and very enthusiastic, and if anything, as my wife pointed out, it's just getting better all the time. We're getting more enthusiastic, and the more people get to know me, anyway, that's my experience. It's like any musician, you know, they've heard a concert of mine before, so they come again, and then you get bigger audiences and more enthusiasm. It builds and builds and builds, and there are thousands and thousands of other musicians that can tell you the same story. But so, you know, it's an evolution of enthusiasm, basically. You know, the audiences are 50% of the music, so you can't say you're a musician or a composer unless you've shared it with somebody else, even one person. The completion of the composition and performance process includes the audience's response without that, you don't complete the circle.
Yeah, that's like they say when you write a novel. If you lock it up in a drawer and never put it out, then it's like you never wrote it.
It's exactly right. Yes. So right now, I'm also spending a lot of time and energy trying to get my music into the hands of other musicians, because I'm not obsessed with being the only one playing my music. In fact, I'd rather that there be more musicians playing my music than me all the time. And so I've produced 2 books so far, Brazilian music. There'll be a 3rd one eventually, and there will be books of tango music, jazz, klezmer, and English country dance music is another very major area of my experience. I have about 300 tunes that will be out in the book eventually, because I have long experience with folk dancing of all kinds, but the English and American folk dancing in particular since I was a kid.
Now, since you've been playing and listening to jazz and Brazilian music for all these years, what would you say that what elements would you say that jazz and Brazilian music have in common?
That's an easy question to answer. Rhythm, phrasing, improvisation, maybe at the top of the list, because Brazilians are extraordinarily good at improvising music. So are Americans too. But if you put those 2 together, you get a dynamite combination. And Stan Getz proved that in the 60s. But so did the Brazilians that played with him. So it was an incredible thing. Also, if you hear a Brazilian batucada, that's a structured but improvised Brazilian percussion experience. There's a great deal of improvisation there, and there's leeway for different rhythms that go along with the main rhythm that the leader is telling you to play. And that's the foundation of Brazilian music, and everything goes on from there. In there are different cultures in Brazil too. There are different kinds of music. It's not just samba and bossa nova. They were preceded by choro, chorinho, which is like folk music that also comes a little bit from Europe. And then there's baixísimo, which is even earlier, from the 19th century. And in addition, there's forró, which more is from the Northeast, right? And then there are many other. And then I said that the batucada, I mentioned batucada, right? Yeah. That's the foundation of Brazilian rhythm. Everything goes on from there.
Yeah, when we think of Brazilian music, we tend to think of just a couple of actual styles, but the richness of Brazilian music is absolutely amazing, like you're mentioning. And whenever we think about Brazilian music from a jazz perspective, is usually the bossa nova, of Jobim and other great composers of the time. But like you're saying, the richness of Brazilian music is really comparable to the richness of American music itself.
No question about it. And Brazil, geographically, is as big as the United States. So basically, it's enormous. It is an enormous variety of cultures. Also, like in France, where my mother's family comes from, there's an extraordinary variety of regions there, particularly in cuisine, in wines, and everything. If you travel throughout France, you'll find 1,000 different mini cultures there in a country that's not that big. So in Brazil, it's even more pronounced, and it's a beautiful thing.
I feel it's a similar thing in Spain. My background is Spanish, and for such a small country like Spain, which is about half of Texas in size, you do get a lot of different cultures and a lot of different cultural elements in the south and the north and the east and the west. A lot of them close to Portugal, and therefore also close to Brazil in some cases, but.
That's right, and you have Galicia in Spain, which isn't even really Spanish in language. Then you have Barcelona, which speaks Catalan, and you're aware of that, all of those things. There are different languages in Spain, which makes for different cultures, too.
Makes for a lot of cultural richness, as we were mentioning about Brazil. You're listening to a new episode of the Jazz Flashes podcast. My name is Anton Garcia Fernandez, coming to you from the northwest of Tennessee, and up in New York City, we have Roger Davidson, who's still at that French restaurant, and we're enjoying a little conversation with him about his album, Oração para Amanhã, in Portuguese, or in English, Prayer for tomorrow. You already mentioned that you have or are in the process of finishing a new album that will be released in a few months. What other projects do you have? Are you playing anywhere regularly that we could tell us about, or what other projects lie in the future for you?
Well, actually, lately I've been trying to cut down my performance schedule and play less regularly, but spend more time writing. I have a backlog of compositions, especially orchestral and choral projects that I want to catch up on, and I'm also spending a lot of time organizing my repertoire, especially my concert classical repertoire, as well as other repertoire, to be published and organized so that I can pass it on to humanity in the future in a more organized way. I don't want to leave a chaotic situation because I'm saying it that way because I've been so prolific that I want everything that I believe in to be well cataloged and well organized. And I'm in the middle of creating, with the help of my friends, a new website called Musica Universalis Publishing. I believe it's .org. That's my publishing company associated with BMI, and then we're in the process of building that website, which will be basically my catalog of all kinds of music, including, of course, Brazilian music and jazz and many other types of music. But organizing and sometimes playing, I don't turn down offers for really good jobs or gigs. I don't turn those down, but I'm not going after weekly gigs, which I used to have, for example, at Cafe Vivaldi in New York City, which was very kind to me for about four maybe 5 years. But I want to spend more time as a writer and also publishing my music so that I can get it into the hands, as I said, of other musicians.
I've already mentioned that whoever gets a chance to listen to Prayer for Tomorrow will find a fresh and rich blend of jazz and Brazilian music. Very enjoyable album. Could you tell the listeners out there what it is that they will hear if they play Oração para Amanhã?
Well, yes, you will hear a variety of Brazilian rhythms and tempos. All of my compositions, from slow to fast to medium, and the thing that ties them all together is a sense of passion for life and desire to, put out good vibrations to my listeners, as I always try to do, no matter what the music is. And it also shows my passion for Brazilian music in the deepest way. So, and I'm very happy with this album because there was a good chemistry among the band, and the presence, as I said, of the love of my wife is present, omnipresent throughout the whole album, as it is in the next one and all of the ones to come, and have been in previous albums too. So, but it's many things. Basically, this album is about music, love, Brazil, and passion for life, and a prayer that we will have a better world. And also, oh yes, one more thing my wife just reminded me of is it's important for us to remember that we need hope for the future, and that is also part of Oração para Amanhã. And the spirit of all of those tunes is about that as well.
A esperança, no, hope.
Você entende?
So, for anybody who may be interested in learning more about Roger Davidson, the Roger Davidson Trio with Hendrik Merkens, we have a website here, soundbrush.com, and also rogerdavidsonmusic.net.
That's right. Please tune in. You'll find updates of what I'm doing and also what other musicians on Soundbrush Records are doing too.
Well, we appreciate it. Thank you so much, Roger, for allowing us some time here to chat a little bit about music, about Brazil, about your new album, Oração para Amanhã, or Prayer for Tomorrow, which just came out a few months ago on Soundbrush Records. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much, and please keep us posted about any other projects you might have, and let us know how they're doing. We'll always like to hear about it here on Jazz Flashes.
Thank you very much. May I ask you one more question?
Yes, sir.
We have time. You're in Tennessee. How does Brazilian music play in Tennessee? And because I've never been to Tennessee, but I have a great respect for culture there in Nashville and elsewhere. I happen to love country music, by the way. And in the past, I wrote some country tunes, which didn't go anywhere because I didn't know anybody who could help me at the time. It was in the 80s, but maybe we'll revive that and put them out into the open.
Well, as far as I know, there isn't a lot of Brazilian music that is played here in Tennessee. I lived in Nashville for several years, and of course, in the Music City, whenever you think of the Music City, music over there means country music. Whatever kind of country music we're talking about. It could be the kind of country music that I like myself, which is the old kind of country music, the western swing and the honky-tonk and that sort of thing. That doesn't have, unfortunately, in Nashville as much of a presence as it used to. The kind of country music that they play now and that they promote there has a lot more to do with, country pop and this new stars. And it's hard for me as a listener to really tell different singers apart, the way that I could when I was listening to Johnny Cash or Ernest Stubb or Patsy Cline or Willie Nelson back in those days. As far as Brazilian music, I haven't really, in the 6 years that I lived in Nashville, I didn't encounter a lot of Brazilian music. I've met Brazilian people there, but not necessarily a lot of Brazilian music.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm always reaching out, trying to create new bridges.
Well, the truth is, now I live in a very small town where there's a university here in northwest Tennessee, and the town is called Martin. It's about 2 hours from Memphis and 3 hours from, about 2.5 hours from Nashville. So, as you can imagine, very little jazz music around here, very little Brazilian music as well. And so the internet for people like me is the only way to go these days. Unfortunately, we don't even have a record store in our little town.
But did you know that I've discovered, thanks to my wife who introduced me to this, that there's a lot of Brazilian country music, which is not that different from what comes out of Nashville. It amounts to the same kind of basic vibe, only it's a different rhythm, different thing. But there is country music in every nation that I have ever been to, and Brazil has a lot of it. And it's really good.
I have actually heard some of that, what they call the sertaneja music from the sertão. And that sounds to me a lot like, American folk music or American country music.
What I said, yeah.
Which proves, again, the richness of music that Brazil has to offer. It's not just bossa nova or samba. It's a lot more different kinds of music, which are very different among each other.
They are. And then through our daughter, she's 19 now, but she loves to play. Are you still with it? Because we had an interruption there.
Yes, sir.
She introduced us to the Brazilian contemporary music, rock music, and it's really good too. So I've listened to a whole range of Brazilian music, especially since I married my wife. And got to know so much more than I ever knew before about Brazilian music. And it's all really good. And so I'm not personally limited to bossa nova and samba and chorinho and machixe. I've gotten to know the others. And also the range of chorinho is extremely broad. So what constitutes a choro or chorinho, as I said, it's quite broad. And it's wonderful. It's part of the fundamental culture of Brazil.
Well, I'm glad that somebody over here in the United States, in New York City, has the interest and the dedication to spread this kind of music and let everybody know that music exists, that it's there, and that it could also be blended with jazz and with other rhythms, and create wonderful examples of music like this album that I have in my hand, Oração para Amanhã, Prayer for Tomorrow. Roger Davidson, has been a real pleasure to talk to you here on the Jazz Flashes podcast, and you're welcome anytime to come back, and we can keep talking about Brazilian music or jazz or classical or anything else, or country music, anything else that you would like to talk about would be open to here on Jazz Flashes.
Thank you. Muito obrigado.
Muito obrigado e até breve.
Até uma outra vez. Okay. Muito obrigado.
And to
Ciao.
everybody out there listening to the Jazz Flashes podcast, thank you very much. My name is Anton Garcia Fernandez, coming to you from the deep in the heart of the state of Tennessee, and you can listen to this podcast on YouTube and also at jazzflashes.blogspot.com. Once again, the music that is highly recommended is Prayer for Tomorrow, or Oração para Amanhã, by the Roger Davidson Trio with Hendrik Merkens. See you soon. Keep listening to good jazz music.